Hey, it's welcome everybody back to Elevating Extraordinary Entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Marty Park, and I'm pretty excited on episode 4 this week. I have a longtime friend of mine and a guy I've known for years, Ernie Tsu. And Ernie is such a great spokesman for the restaurant business. Ernie is the managing partner over at Trolley 5 on 17th Avenue. If you've probably seen it, if you haven't been there to drink beer or eat some of their fantastic barbecue. And he's also the president of the Alberta Hospitality Association. So, Ernie, welcome to the show.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me, Marty. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Ernie, you and I were just touching on it, but we've known each other for probably 25 years. And I was thinking about, so I'll run through sort of all my, my first restaurant, you and I were partners for about 8 weeks. And then you had a chance to buy into something else. But in some ways, you were involved in my start in the service industry. And then I remember on industry nights, you being around town, a real celebrity bartender, and just throwing some of the best parties at Senior Frogs. And then there was another place after that was a saloon or sort of in my mind, I can't remember what it was called. But I remember just people saying like, oh, Ernie's behind the bar. It's going to be a good time. And then moving into, all the things you've done since then, right? Some of the pubs you had and involvement on 17th, but you've just been a staple in the restaurant business and the hospitality space. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you today.
Well, thanks, man. Yeah. Go ahead. No, go hit me.
Oh, okay. So I wanted to know, when you've having all that experience in the restaurant business, and the numbers side of it, the marketing side of it, the people side of it, and that's one of the things I appreciated, even to the extent that your family business or you growing up in the restaurant business. Now, what's the name of your family's business?
So our family has the Silver Dragon.
That's
54 years now it's been open. So Silver Dragon Calgary and Silver Dragon in Banff.
Right.
Yeah, that's
I love how you bring the dim sum over even to Trolley.
Wow, beer, dim sum it goes well, man. You don't have to just go to a Chinese restaurant now to have dim sum. Yeah, you can have it at brewery.
Exactly. I love that. I think everybody appreciates, and it was in the news so much when COVID hit, that restaurants are struggling, in part because it was obvious to people that, hey, you're staying home, you're obviously not going to restaurants. What was it like for you in the early days where you quickly recognized business has just fallen off a cliff? Can you tell me about what that experience was like for you, for staff, and maybe some of the immediate things you did or how you managed through it personally and like running the business?
Yeah, we were blessed at Trolley 5 because we are a brewery and a restaurant. Now, the restaurant out of the 16,000 square feet takes up 13,000 square feet of this building.
Right.
But, we were blessed. We were able to pivot. Our brewery was able to keep the whole building moving forward. We did, our main focus was home deliveries on beer. I didn't end up doing anything with takeout food. Okay. Instead, what we did was promote some of the restaurants beside us on 17th Avenue that were doing takeout food. Market was doing a strong program back in the first year of the pandemic. Our friends at Modern Steak, when they came up with M Burger, so our focus was to really, focus on getting our craft beer out to houses. And, the support from the public was amazing. Our management team that, stuck it through, long hours, but everybody stepped up to deliver. We had to shut down all our warehouses, bring everything into Trolley 5 became a warehouse essentially of just a massive brewery where we packaged everything on site, right. And then got the beer out on the road. But it was definitely tough. It was tough physically, it was tough mentally, but yeah, because of the people we had around us, we were able to get through it.
You mentioned, I was going to ask if the team was quick to get on board with that. Did everybody pull together to really be able to, make that adaptation and be like, hey, this has got to be our focus and here's what we're going to do?
Yeah, the team. I mean, it was a scary time for everybody because we didn't know how long the first restricted lockdown was going to be. It was somewhat pretty much up in the air when government announced, as every province was. But for the tight knit management team that stuck through this, it was hard. It was mentally and physically hard for everybody. I mean, everyone had to take a pay cut to try to just have the business survive and to still be able to facilitate some, paychecks, period, over, instead of going on EI or.
Ernie, I think everybody always talks about, I think they hear this, like being in the restaurant business is really tough. But as the Alberta Hospitality Association president, you have perspective on sort of all aspects of the business. Can you speak to a little bit or educate people on, like, when people talk about why is the hospitality or the restaurant business tough? Can you sort of just talk a little bit about margins or about costs and how that looks so people really understand why it's been so difficult just to survive, even in a good market?
Yeah, even in the good times, I think it was a year before COVID had even hit. Canada Restaurant Association had released the stat after gathering up a massive survey across the country. A restaurant, even a good well-run restaurant, you're looking at about a 3 to 5% profit margin, right? Profit margins are tight. What people started to realize is, especially during the pandemic, what we do in restaurants, we do because we love. We love what.
Oh, Ernie, I may have lost you there.
You know, yeah. Are you back?
I can hear you now.
Are you there, Marty? Yeah. So so we're already, restaurants already operate on a tight margin, and then to have the lockdowns come through when they did, it was. I mean, we've already seen it. We've seen a 20% loss just in Alberta on well-known restaurants that were around for longer than 5 years, right? Deep rooted in the community, both local charities that they donated to or hosting local fundraisers. So it's definitely already a tough business to be in, and then coming out of the pandemic after being locked out or locked down for almost 2 years collectively, it's now every restaurant has to be resilient and try to get moving forward.
Yeah, and you know what I really appreciate? I give a shout out to every independent operator and small restaurant group who's been able to survive and starts to see that business come back. There's nothing better than we have a client who's out in Victoria, and he starts to see that dining room revenue come back and still has the takeout business, and events are coming back. And it's just so refreshing that, okay, there's a bit of a return to normal, that he can start to predict things again.
Yeah, and I think the biggest positive coming out of this is the support from the public. Like you start to really see, the public step up to support their local restaurant or pub in their area. Now that Dax QR code is in, we're seeing that confidence come back from corporate as well, right? So we're starting to see a lot of the corporate functions start to rebook, and they're obviously starting to slowly get back to work downtown. We hope that the stay-at-home work order gets lifted in Q1 here, so that our downtown restaurants can really start to get back up on their feet in the Calgary and in the Edmonton area.
Now, and you obviously had a big role as being a spokesperson through the pandemic. I mean, you talked with government regularly to give them the perspective of, hey, here's what's going to be needed to keep the lights on for hospitality, right?
Yeah, and it wasn't just about keeping the lights on. Now our main focus with government is to ensure that to really ensure that we're not putting staff or managers or businesses in harm's way. The masking bylaw restaurant hospitality wants to do whatever humanly possible to make sure the public is safe.
Right.
But we need to have an even playing field, and we're dealing with the government, and that's massive. The way that the government has handled certain situations in terms of the policy writing, and we can talk about the elephant in the room right now. If we go to a local restaurant, if we're at a local restaurant, we have to be wearing a mask at all times if we're not situated at the table. Yet, if we're at a large venue, whether it's the Saddle Dome or the Jubilee or Rogers Place, the enforcement just does not seem to be there, right? So, it's not about trying to pit small business versus big business. It's about trying to make sure that written policy in terms of enforcement, in terms of fining or shutting down a restaurant, is the exact same across the board for big box and for the large venues as well. I mean, I went to the City and Color concert, but I loved it. I'm the fourth time seeing Dallas Green, but if we go by the rules that are written by Alberta Health, there was zero enforcement there. Masks were not being worn in the concourse area. There are no tables set out in the concourse area, so therefore the writing of that rule does not make any sense. Which then puts restaurants into harm's way, because if you have people that are at the Dome, or they're operating at a different normalcy, and then they come into a restaurant, and as soon as they make a move off their table, we're enforcing them to wear the mask. Now we're seeing like altercations happen between customer and business. The business has tried to enforce the written rule that Alberta Health is also putting down and enforcing on the restaurants. So dealing with government, that's our main goal, is to make sure that policy that's being written makes sense, and it makes sense for everybody, like the public, as well as hospitality, and as well as big box as well, the larger venues as well. The latest, I think what's really important is the latest writing of this rule of Order 52 to the live music industry. So these venues where so local bands, I mean, the very first restaurant you own, Marty, Karma Local Arts House, was predicated on supporting local musicians. Michael Bernard Fitzgerald, that was the first. Michael Bernard Fitzgerald, that was his first gig, man. Was Karma. Was Karma House there, right? So, it's the small local venues that help jumpstart our local musicians. And now, with the new restrictions and the writing of this mask law, I know one venue in an unbelievable venue that's one of the best venues in Western Canada. There's $65,000 invested into some major shows coming up, and now with the adjustments of a health order that got changed in 24 hours. There's amendments to these health orders over 24 hours, and then no communication, right? So that's our hope with government, is to ensure that the communication process is far better for the general public as they go into our venues.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I loved your point about no venue owner, whether it's music or restaurant. I mean, the idea that they're not most concerned with everybody's safety. They absolutely are. But I know, having Karma as a music venue and opening up the Ironwood with Soren and the Ironwood Stage and Grill still operating, right? They're running big shows. They've got stuff coming up for Christmas. It's interesting. I'm interested to transition from that to ask you about, because you've been such a leader, what did the pandemic do, or running COVID? How did it ask you to step up from a leadership standpoint? Is there anything it drew from you that you were like, it really forced me to grow as a business owner, as a leader?
Yeah, I think the largest thing that I learned was mental health. Was for myself, it was not identifying how mentally tough this has been on everybody. And for myself, if there was one thing I could go and change immediately right now at a snap of a finger, would be far more conversations with my team on their mental health status throughout the pandemic. Because when you're fighting to survive and you're working that amount of hours and your team's working long hours, it gets missed, right? And it really
Right.
shouldn't. But then the largest blessing out of our association, with dealing with so many operators across the whole province, was hearing about the mental health aspects that were taking place, from everything from a 30-seat restaurant up to a 700 person venue, live music venue, or 700 person super pub. So, from a leadership standpoint, if there's anything I could go back and change, I think we'd work far closer with mental health outlets, and should have pivoted faster to have that mental health, those resources ready for not just our staff, but hospitality across the province.
You know what, and Ernie, I love that as a point, because I think that's one thing that any business owner, and we sort of talk about the pandemic today like it's sort of past, but I think we've just adjusted to it, right? I mean, it's still going on. As you said, there's still new changes to bylaws and stuff that still take place. It's still being managed. But I found across all of my clients, them finding out that quietly somebody was struggling at their desk, or quietly somebody's working from a home office, that ability to just have the conversation and be like, how are you? Let's take a moment and talk about the individuals and supporting our team like that. I think that is such a great leadership guideline for anybody in the pandemic, but certainly going forward, that should never change. That should be a key piece of that leadership.
Yeah. And the pandemic has changed so much. It's the mindset and approach to daily business, the mindset and approach to your daily team, and making sure that you have the right energy coming into the room, and you have individuals that are providing the right energy coming into the room, is now more important than ever. I think especially in our industry, as well as, even my friends that are, high executives in some big box stores, the struggle for labor right now to get manpower in is
Right.
so mentally taxing, because now you have, one person doing 4 jobs lumped into, one office. It's been wearing for sure.
Yeah.
But on a positive standpoint, now it has to make us as owners, as entrepreneurs, really approach the business every day on looking at every single angle to ensure that our team is taken care of and that we're still able to move the business forward. The hospitality industry, holy shit, like, you have to look at everything. That it's not only just the pandemic that everyone has to get their money back for the last 2 years and try to break even. Now there's labor costs associated, because it's, there's a shortage of labor. The supply chain management, thank goodness the media has been focused on supplying chain management issues for all industries, not just our industry, right? So,
Right.
You're seeing a carton of milk in a grocery store, it's up by 20%. Eggs are up, chicken. So, now more than ever, it's that approach of, now every entrepreneur has to look at every angle possible with their team at how to get through Q1,
I think some of the things you said there are so important, Ernie, because it's not only, this is a great point. People think, oh, well, the pandemic's over. I mean, if it was over tomorrow, people would be like, well, see, restaurants are fine now. But they don't appreciate you've got to dig out from all of that debt or reinvestment you had to make, right? There's years of recovery that comes into that. And then when you look at the cost of everything going up, the difficulty finding labor, I think that's one of the reasons I thought you being that voice of just giving people some perspective on, it's not something that just ends. It is, how do you dig yourself out of it? And how do you maintain, fresh margin? When the person says, well, I don't understand why food costs are going up. These guys must be making so much money. It's really just, again, to sustain the business, keep it going forward from the spirit of really servicing people, right? The spirit of hospitality.
Yeah, and not just our mentality of being able to serve people, but our communities as well. I mean, you look at any, like, I'd say 80% of, probably 85% of restaurants across the province, when do they ever say no? When do they ever say no to, hey, would you be able to donate a gift card for our local charity or our son's minor hockey association? it's a very rare that you ever hear a restaurant say no, or brewery. Like, you look at the local breweries, the donations of beers for Christmas baskets and so forth. So, I look at small little restaurants like, Leslie that sits on our board and at Canada Restaurants. Right. She has Annabelle's Kitchen in Marteloo. And even through the worst of times, she's still donating back to local charities and getting gift cards out, right? So, in the rural areas, especially, those local restaurants have always been there for your fundraiser, for, the situations where you're trying to raise money for your local sporting associations or your local charities. So for us as restaurateurs across the province, like hearing that feedback, that's where it's mentally challenging when especially in the rural areas, when they've worked so hard to be a part of that community, and then the government puts out the first wave of the REP program, and public kind of turns on them, right? Saying that, you're institutionalizing this vaccination when the whole time it's been a government mandate. Let's make sure that everyone is fully aware of that. Any layer of restrictions that have come down has been a government mandate. This has not been a restaurant's choice to, implement these restrictions, right? Look, first stage of REP was you either implement the masks and vaccination number 1, proof of, or you're only allowed to operate your patios. Well, that was in late October leading into November. Who's going to, spend money to enclose and you can't have an enclosed patio underneath the rules. So you're essentially closed.
You're right. It's called Canada. Maybe you've been there. Yeah, exactly. Right. Do you I appreciate that. And I think recognizing that people in the industry, if you're out for dinner, that a lot of this, the people you're dealing with, whether it's the hostess, the server, I mean, they're doing their job, right? And I think in some ways, every one of those employees recognizes some of these guidelines are ridiculous, or this isn't helping, that if you're on this side of the line, you're okay, but on that side of the line, you're not. So you've got to, as customers, appreciate that they're doing their best and trying to navigate something that's still new and changing on an ongoing basis.
And I think masks is such a huge component right now. The Bow Valley area, Banff, we're having managers in Banff and staff actually physically being pushed or almost assaulted by guests that are being told to put their mask on when they're moving throughout the room. And then at the same time, you have Alberta Health going in and enforcing a fine or a possible closure if the masks aren't being enforced at 150% by those local owners. Well, that again is in harm's way. But that's where we're working with government. Government has to be better at communicating to the public that restaurants could be fined if these mask rules are not being followed at 110%. Yet, when they're at a hockey game or a football game or concert in a large venue or a mall, it's not. It's a different playing field, and that's where the largest struggle is right now, especially mentally. Coming into work thinking that you're going to have to deal with the situation because the government hasn't laid out strong enough communication. That's mentally taxing for any owner.
Well, you know what, and I think about this because and I'll tell this story about my personal experience with you in a second. But I think the idea of, like you said, if I had to go into work and I know I'm in an environment, let's say a lot of our clientele are men, right? And I'm a young woman who's a server, and now I know that I'm, there's that physical intimidation of a table full of men, or there's that ability that somebody raising your voice, somebody older, like there's all this demographics in the human nature that play into like the idea that I got to go to work and fight these people is just so draining every single shift. The reason I was gonna tell the story of just the my wife and I don't know if you remember this, but you had just opened up Rodney's Oyster House, and my wife Lisa and I, we had just gotten away for an afternoon. It was Friday afternoon. We're having oysters and some champagne, and there was a guy who'd been in there all afternoon and was pretty intoxicated, and he decided he wanted to talk to my wife. And you came out of nowhere and sort of stepped in, and a little bit like Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze, where you were quiet, you were polite, but before the guy knew it, he had an arm kind of bent backwards, and you were showing him to the front door. And you were so gracious about making sure we were okay, and getting us another glass of champagne. But I bring up that story because there's that element of if it was reversed, that customer is maybe not drunk now, but he's just abusive about the mask situation, or about not happy with the mandates and how their server, and really the level of care that you have to have back towards the people who are in the service industry right now, I think is really important too.
Yeah, and again, I implore the public, like, when it comes to these issues with the masks and what restaurants are trying to do to enforce and to make sure that they're following the guidelines that have been laid out by Alberta Health, please contact AHS, contact your local MLA. I love what one of our members has a sign right at his front door. If you have any complaints about the rules or the restrictions that have been laid out in restaurants, please contact local MLA at Boom. Right, he's got
Here's an
address there, right? So, which is great for us as an association because we're able to track those measurable metrics when we deal with government. But again, I mean, there's the confusion. There's, to hear about the physical altercations that are taking place between guests and managers or owners regarding, guidelines that are still a little bit hazy to public. Or my favorite is they get changed in 24 hours and there's no communication.
Right.
That's something that I hope everyone truly understands out there. No restaurant owner wakes up saying, "Hey, I'm going to try to make someone's experience terrible today." Right. We're never perfect, but by any means,
Right.
like, we don't wake up saying, like, we're trying to dig our way out of 2 years of debt. Doing shitty for table 405, right? So yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, I think we'll go pick on that table of people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ernie, if I turn this around and just say of the things you've had to innovate, whether it be like the QR code for menus or maybe the way you run inventory, are there any aspects to the business that the pandemic has caused you to say, hey, this is actually going to be an improvement going forward, or this is something we're going to keep? Are there any innovations that have come out of it that you kind of like?
Sorry,
Are you there?
Marty, I patching out a little bit there.
Yep, you're
Are
back
you
now.
there?
Yep.
Are you? Yeah. Sorry, was that I apologize, it cut out a little bit. Was that innovation during the pandemic or coming out of?
Yeah. So I was wondering if there's anything that's you've been forced to change that now you realize, hey, this is actually a way we could continue to do business, where you're actually going to keep some of that innovation.
Well, for us, it's been the online ordering of our product online for beer. Especially for home deliveries, not necessarily just for our liquor stores and local restaurants that we supply, but especially for people that are still working from home and they don't feel 100% safe in going out yet or socializing at that level.
Right.
For us, that's been our main focus, is to maintain that home service and be able to service, everybody that wants to socialize and the people that don't. Inside the restaurant, the use of iPads now is becoming far more prevalent. But at the same time, we don't want to. We're at that breaking point. Do we want to move more, technical or do we want to maintain that personal level of service? So that's something that we're discussing every day as we go along through this Christmas season, for sure.
I was in the Toronto airport last year, and they had a beer, like a little brewery, and it was interesting because there was no servers. All you interacted with was the punch, or somebody handed you the drink. And while it was efficient, I found it to be terrible because there was just no interaction. It was me and an iPad, and oftentimes now, as everybody's got more technology in front of them, you sit at the bar and you don't even talk to anybody at the wood. So I like the idea that you're at least thinking about how far do we want to push the technology for efficiency without losing the customer experience, right? In that relationship.
Yeah, and it's hard. For myself being old school, and especially with the brewery. I mean, this is what we do. This is what my passion is. Beer
Right.
is yeah. I mean, we could have an iPad with tasting notes on it. I want guests to be able to ask, our staff, what their personal opinion is, right? So,
Right.
McKenna's personal opinion might be, hey, this IPA is a little bit far too hoppy for me. But if you're a hophead, you're going to love the citrus resin notes that come off of it, right?
Right. Right. The
That's where we
hop
really
head.
don't want to lose we don't want to lose that personal touch for sure.
Yeah. One of the things
Yeah.
I liked is that and I think this is true of a lot of business models. When I see any sort of company where it's sort of we have a one-trick pony, would you say that the fact that, and I think you mentioned it, the fact that there's the brewery and a restaurant, like there's different facets or different avenues within within Trolley 5, is that one of the things that made the pandemic and any sort of tough economic times makes you more viable or just healthier as a business?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously we have two businesses inside one building, right? And
Right.
the brewery, without the brewery, I don't know if we would have made it out. I'll be completely honest. If we
Yeah.
didn't have the brewery, I don't think 16,000 square feet of a restaurant shut down for almost 14 to 19 months, and fully shut down, right?
Right.
Think
Right.
about takeout. You know, is not takeout delivery food is not going to be able to keep 16,000 square feet of building open. It's just not wouldn't be viable. So
Right.
we're blessed that we have a brewery inside the restaurant now. For our association, our members, I mean, there were some breweries that there's some breweries with that. Their model is more of a brew pub style, and they're not distributing to retail or other restaurants, and it all goes into one building. Well, that's where we saw they had to pivot because now their tap room isn't open, right? So they had to
Right. Right.
move into the retail market as well, right? So, but it's great to see. I mean, we're over 150 breweries now across the province. 6
Wow.
years ago, yeah, 6 years ago, when we opened at Trolley 5 was one of only, I think it was 11 breweries across the province at that point 6 years ago. And then now to see this amazing craft beer culture across the province, it's been awesome that way. It's been so great. Establishment Brewing just got Brewery of the Year at the Canadian Brewing Awards.
Right.
Calgary breweries. So that again, it's amazing to see how the brewing industry is growing within the Alberta area.
You know what? I see it in Alberta. I mean, I'm lucky enough to know principals in at least 5 microbreweries. But I see it across Canada and actually even in Montana. The craft brewery explosion everywhere. Right? Oregon's hot for that. I mean, it's just great to see because I think it's an industry where you can have so many small players that do create craft product, and it really creates a rich landscape for the customers. Just like having lots of different restaurants and the viability and health of the restaurants gives you all that choice and experience of different foods and different experiences.
Yeah. Well, on restaurants and breweries, I mean, look at what restaurants and breweries give back to the economy too. The amount of jobs they supply,
Please
and
touch on that. Yeah.
you look at people that are going to school that need to make money while they're at school, facilitate their tuition. What better industry can give you a flexible schedule around your exam schedules or your school schedule than hospitality? And I think that was one amazing positive that came out of this. So many doctors, lawyers, nurses, that came up through our industry were quite vocal about once these lockdowns started to take place, that our industry has provided those jobs, whether it be part-time or full-time, for students
Right.
while they try to get their careers built. So
Absolutely.
look at BC, British Columbia breweries. I think they're over like 225 now. They are a key piece of the economy out there. A key piece when you look at how many jobs those breweries supply right across that province. So Alberta's on the way there. We're over 150 distilleries are opening up too, and
Yep.
the more jobs, the better. Yeah.
Actually, and Ernie, I maybe transition to wrap that up by saying that when you think about the microbrewery, when you think about the restaurant down the way, you've got to think about, the jobs it supplies to the suppliers, right? The food suppliers, the mat and cleaning companies, and then the people that actually work for the restaurant, and recognize that there's so many places that they are impacting and supporting the local economy. And as you said, I can't think of a restaurant or bar person who hasn't, at some point, when you ask for that gift certificate, free beer, whatever it is, help our charity, they are the first ones to say, how do you help our community? I think that hospitality and community support, just to want everybody who's listening to remember that as they move forward supporting restaurants and breweries and people in the hospitality space. It's a big piece of our communities and our economy.
Yeah, especially on that local charity area. Talk to the local charities, and they'll tell you, what hospitality means to them, right?
Yeah.
Whether it be hosting a charity event to just sheer donations or collaborative charity movements. Like right now there's coat drive across the province across the city for the drop-in center. And it's been amazing to see so many people getting out and donating their generally used coats to local restaurants and some of the fitness gyms that have stepped up to do it. And my goodness, man, think about that industry.
Oh yeah.
We've gone through a tough time with the pandemic. I think about the fitness industry and I'm like, oh yeah, I don't know how they got out. Right. So, hats off to them for sure.
Yeah, I absolutely, totally. In fact, I know some numbers. I won't share them, but I'd heard some numbers about even Good Life, where you think of as being, the big whale in the fitness space and the impact it's had on their business and their economic health. It's just unbelievable. Ernie, I want to say thanks very much for joining me, and thanks to everybody who's tuned in to episode number 4. We're going to start posting all of these episodes to my YouTube channel, so feel free. You can go back and watch those previous episodes there. Ernie, thank you so much for your insights and your opinions and just your experience, and if nothing else, your hospitality and your leadership in the space of restaurants, bars, microbreweries, all of that.
Yeah. Thanks, Marty. And it's good to see you, man. It's been a long time for sure, popping in and out, and I love what you're doing for local entrepreneurs. It's been awesome.
Ernie, if somebody wants to find you, where can they connect with you? Is it off Instagram, or what's the easiest way to connect with you?
Yeah, I'm on all the social media channels, but I'm here every day. Pop in for a beer. Come by the brewery sometime.
Perfect. Yeah, and that'll be my last shout out. If you haven't been to Trolley 5, go down. The staff are fantastic. The beers are excellent. I love a First Crush. It's my starter beer on a summer day. Thanks very much. Again, if you want anything from me, you can follow me at the Marty Park on social. But otherwise, thanks everybody for tuning in. Again, Ernie, thanks very much, and have a great weekend.